Do you feel like you're getting stuck inside of yourself, almost like you're drowning within and you're losing all connection to the external world? Or on the other hand, the other extreme, do you feel overly drained by the external world, like it's sucking out all the energy from you? Then keep watching this video because I will tell you how this is correlated to introversion or introversion loops based on your personality. Okay, welcome back to Typevolution, where I talk about how to evolve with your personality type. I can tell you, even if you don't know about personality types, every introvert has a natural proclivity to engage with their introversion. Obviously, that makes them an introvert. So that means, in more Jungian terms, every introvert is more inclined to use their introverted functions, no matter what your type is. Whereas, on the other hand, extroverts, on average, there can be a few exceptions, but on average, they are more inclined to avoid the introverted functions and go more into the extroverted functions, simply because they are an extrovert. But I talked more about the differences based on the subtypes, and you should watch that video because there I go more into depth. So I also explained that even extroverts can have so-called introversion loops, and especially the secondary introverted subtype for the extrovert can make that happen. But let's go back to introverts. So because you are generally more inclined towards using your introverted functions and even the functions that are not in the top 4 in MBTI, Socionics goes more into depth in how you also use the other introverted functions. Anyway, so because you have that tendency, you will generally not be inclined to use your extroverted function. I have seen that this creates also an imbalance, obviously. The idea is to be the most well-rounded that we also use our second function. So that does not mean that you should use it more than your first one, because that would be another mistake or another issue, but rather that let's say you use your first one a bit more often, but you also use your second one. That would create more balance because, as I described in the beginning, an introvert who is not doing that, an introvert who is constantly introspecting, introverting, will lose the connection to the external world. And I can talk from experience here. You will just more and more get lost within yourself. And this can happen to all introverts. There are certain kinds of introverts who are more inclined to do this. Let's say perhaps the IN types, but even the IS types can fall into that trap. So as I said, the good thing would be to also go into your second function. So what does it even mean? It just means that you go into your extroverted self, how you approach the world in the most natural and preferable way. And that depends on your second function in MBTI or Jungian or 16 personalities. And I want to also demystify a certain stereotype here that people say, oh, you should focus on your inferior function because that would make you the most balanced. Now, on one hand, that is not incorrect because your inferior in MBTI is the balance to your first function. However, it is very difficult, if not almost impossible, to provide that kind of dichotomous balance to yourself because it's so different from your main perception, your main mode. It's almost impossible, or if it's not impossible, then it's just a very weak link. And anyone who claims that they are going into the inferior function a lot on a regular basis and with awareness, conscious awareness, in my experience and based on my understanding of the theory, are usually people who are mistyping their second function as their inferior. So anyone who claims usually to be really much in touch with their inferior SE, inferior whatever function, oftentimes they actually have it as a second function. If you can do that, if you have a natural affinity and you have conscious awareness of going to this particular extroverted function, that is a good thing. It does create balance and it is the balancing point towards your personality, but it doesn't mean it's your inferior function. The inferior function is just way too removed from your, as also conscious awareness usually. It's just really hard to access it. You're mostly able to do that in reflection with another person who has that as a first or second function. Then it's much more easier to access it, but even then it's still difficult to do it on your own. So I would not really recommend it. Go into your secondary function. It's the function that you have conscious awareness of, that you like to use, and that comes very naturally towards you. So whenever you engage with the external world, take note what you naturally like to do and what you naturally are good at to do. So when it comes to SE, Extroverted Sensing, it would be engaging with the physical world as it is, observing the externalities of objects. That's how I describe it on my blog, typevolution.com. So really engaging with the world, what it looks like, how it is, also with the physical energy of yourself, of other people, body language. I often notice that people who have SE are also way more attuned towards body language. So little things like that. That is how Extroverted Sensing usually would manifest itself, and if that is natural for you, then keep doing it. But I will mention why not to overdo it later. So with FE, Extroverted Feeling, it's emoting, it's creating this emotional energy, and especially if you are in a, let's say, video call or just in person with someone and having this back and forth, the mirroring of emotional energy, of moods, or directing it yourself, creating some kind of mood. That is when you use FE, and it actually will make you feel more fulfilled as an introvert who has FE as a second function. If you do not have it as a second function but as another function or in the background, you might be even able to use it. INFPs and ISFPs can use FE also even pretty well, ironically. And ISFJs and ICJs can use SE pretty well because they are sensing types, and ISFPs and INFPs are feeling types, so they have good feeling overall. By the way, this is based on socionics. So they can use it, but they won't feel that satisfied or that fulfilled internally. Whereas when an INFJ or ISFJ uses their FE regularly, not too often of course, but if they do it, it really invigorates them a bit more. It makes them come alive. For SE people who have SE second, they come alive when they really engage with the physical world.
You know, when I don't ride a motorcycle, I go through withdrawal. It's not good for my health.
Okay. Oh shit. Okay, so the batteries of my camera died, and I'm just gonna do the voiceover now. So for NE, yeah, it's looking at all these possibilities, the potentials, potential concepts, how you can look at things in a different, new way, innovative ideas. Do that more as if you're an INFP or INTP, just coming up with these random connections or ways how you can synergize different concepts or ideas together to create something new. And I want to make a disclaimer here. Of course, we all use all functions, but it's about which ones you prefer to use and which ones you are naturally good at, and which ones you're not naturally good at, and which ones you don't like to use that much. And also I want to make another disclaimer with NE. There's a lot of misconceptions about NE and being related to logic. Both NE and TI deal with theories in certain ways. With TI, it's always related to logic, to structure, to hierarchies, how things work together make sense. Whereas with NE, the theory or concept itself can be very nonsensical. It can be very contradictory. It can be very illogical. It's more about the idea, the concept of something without the logic behind it. And also, of course, types who are not using NE can also have ideas, but those ideas will be tied to their real extroverted function. So SE can also have ideas about, let's say, how to create a certain piece of clothing, or ideas about, for example, how the MBTI types dress. I've seen those videos pop up on YouTube, and that's just SE having an idea about fashion and the types. So that's like an SE idea, but it's not NE. NE is more the conceptual way of looking at the world, more like a utopia, a dystopia, how the world could potentially be like, for example. Anyway, so let's go to TE. That would be really data, logical data that is out there in the world, information, really soaking it up, reading as much as you can about a certain topic, really getting the facts down, streamlining your work efficiency, your work process, getting things ordered. Those can be TE related aspects, and that is best to focus more on if you're an INTJ or ISTJ. You can read more about the light and dark side of the cognitive functions on my blog. I have an article about it, and I will make videos about the light and dark sides, well, mostly the light sides of the cognitive functions. Light side meaning the version of your function that is most beneficial for you and humanity without harming anyone. And it's basically the highest expression of that function. And I also do not advise introverts to overdo it, right? So when I tell you, okay, as an introvert, please go more into your extroverted side from time to time, that does not mean that you should overdo it and always go in it. There are some introverts out there who are getting really drained by overly doing this. You can even get drained as an introvert if you go too much into the introvert functions you do not value. So in the case of MBTI, that would mean every introverted function that is not in the top 4. You can go into that, but you will feel drained at some point. So that can drain you. And well, technically any function can drain you except for your first function, actually. But that's for another video, I suppose. So yeah, don't do that. And also, of course, please don't overdo the extroversion. The worst thing you can do is not even overdo it with your second function, but to overdo it with an extrovert function that is not even valued by you. Either like, okay, you value the inferior function actually, but even worse if it's an extroverted function that is not in the top 4 in MBTI. For INFJ, for example, that would be TE, T, and well, NE also. They can use it actually pretty well, but they don't value it, so it can get boring actually, or just tedious. And yeah, but they also should not use SE too much. I mean, they cannot even do that anyway, but I'm just saying hypothetically maybe, but they cannot do it anyway, so that's not really an issue. But yeah, basically don't overdo your extrovert function either. It's about a bit of a balance. You won't ever have total balance simply because no one is a total ambivert, so you will always lean towards introversion, extroversion, but it's important not to get too lost in one side. So when you feel like you're getting lost within yourself, go to your secondary extroverted function as an introvert, or even if you're an extrovert and you're starting to feel this way, go back to your first extroverted function. That would be the best thing to do. And if you're an introvert who feels totally drained, then the best thing to do is to go back to your first function. And that will release all the tension, the stress. So I will talk more about that probably in my other video when I advise what extroverts should do. So the key takeaways are, as an introvert or as an extrovert who has been too much introverting, go into your extroverted function, and that is either the first or second one. In the case of introverts, it's the second. In the case of extroverts, it's the first. The going into the inferior yourself, by yourself, alone, a lot, and consciously, and doing it well is a myth. That is a myth that is perpetuated by mistypes of people who are actually, let's say, introverts, who are using their secondary function more. That's how it actually works. In an MBTI, it might seem like you can actually use your inferior function more. In socionics, it's much better described how different your introvert, different that function is from you, your psyche, how far removed it is from you. It's like night and day, basically. And if you are feeling too drained, just go back to your first function. It's possible that even if you have not been extroverting too much, you might have been using another introverted function too much. So going back to your first function should remedy that. Then you will gain some kind of equilibrium back. All right, if you want me to type you, then go to typevolution.com/services to get typed. Also, I offer consulting, type consulting, where I answer questions about type theory. I also do type coaching, where I give you coaching advice based on your personal situation and your personality types. And yeah, that's all. And I also have a blog where I have celebrity typings, viptypology.wordpress.com. Yep, okay, that's it. Have a good day. Bye.